Testing. All right, there we go. Uh, there should be sound now because now I can see the bars lighting up on the screen. Uh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I've been jibber jabbering for 5 minutes here about. Uh, I just want to apologize. I haven't streamed all week because I've been trying to get as much rest as I can and recover this stiff neck or herniated disc in my neck. And 2 weeks ago I was feeling really good. I wasn't taking anything over the counter, no pain medications like ibuprofen or anything. And so I went right back into a nice, you know, double live stream day where it's almost 5 hours of sitting in this chair. And that set me back. So I decided this week I'm not going to do anything until, I'm at least about 80%. So I would say right now I'm close to about 70% good on my neck. I'm taking some ibuprofen right now, just a regular dose, nothing crazy. And I'm feeling okay. I feel pretty good, but um, I'm gonna have to hold off on live streaming for a bit because sitting in this chair in this position apparently is making it worse. And I really need to take some time and reorganize this studio so I'm in a better position to sit down and chat and talk to everybody. But gosh, so much has been going on this week. I guess Jimmy Chang. I watched Jimmy Chang's live stream this week about all the big news he's hoping for 2022 next year for Micro Four Thirds. And Robin had a video about what he thinks Olympus should do or OM Digital Solutions should do. And Peter, everybody's been really busy, so that's great. I want to get back up to speed here very quickly. I'm going to try because I have so many ideas in mind and I feel ready to start making videos again, doing my long form tutorials, my deep dives, my fine print series, and do some vlogging because it's going to really warm up this week really nicely. And it's killing me that, I can't get out, and it's not even pandemic related. It's just me. Like I went out yesterday on a photo walk with the local photography club run by David Crooks. I'm not sure if he came in yet, but um, yeah, after, about 2 hours of a photo walk and then we had lunch, I was hurting pretty bad yesterday and wasn't sure if I was going to be able to live stream. So what I did this morning, I got home and I just rested, you know. Um, So this morning, I did my normal heating pad, then ice pack and stretches and exercises and some ibuprofen, and I feel pretty good. Um, so I just and I really miss everyone, coming in and hanging out and having a little conversation about photography. So um, that's really why I wanted to come on. So this morning when I woke up, I just put the live stream up for a little bit later than usual, but uh, I hope everyone's doing well and getting through this time that we're in worldwide, and going out and doing some photography because I've tried to do some photography this week. Like I said, I went yesterday and I did some photo walk with the local club, and I did a moonshot. If you guys saw that on my Instagram, maybe I can pull it up. Um, we'll talk about that a little bit because there were some questions in the comments on this image, and let's see if I can get over there. Nope, this one. Uh, it was. Where's my mouse? This image here. Okay, so this is a moon. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. But this was with the EM1 Mark III and the 75 to 300. The cheap one. Oh, here it is. The 75 to 300 not an expensive lens, 400 bucks. And what I did was is I took 60 images. So I used the intervalometer built into our cameras, and it took what are the settings here? Uh, f8 1/80th of a second. So these are 1/80th of a second, and I took 60 images, and then I went into Photoshop, and you can blend them back together using median mode, and it brings out a little more detail. Not as much as I had hoped, but it did bring out some more detail. And this was on a tripod, and I didn't have to reposition the tripod or anything because the moon stayed within frame the whole time. But then let me go back to Photoshop and I'll show you. But then in Photoshop, you know, you create 60 layers and then you blend them back together, uh, and um, and that's supposed to give more detail. Now, where was I going with that? Oh, but like I said, the moon did move inside of the frame, so I had to recrop all of the images. Oh, I did it on the other computer. I haven't been in this room all week. I think the images are on this machine, but I don't have any of the I don't have any of the images I did. Um, this is just a straight up shot. I was trying to do some astrophotography because I had that live stream with Ben a couple weeks ago, and I live in a Bortle 7, a very high Bortle 7, nearly a Bortle 8, which means it's really bright here. So I was lucky to get anything. But you can see this is a 75 millimeter lens, a 2-second exposure, and there's still a tiny bit of trails here. That actually looks more like the camera moved a little bit more than it does like a star trail. Because star trails, usually you get more of an egg shape type uh, thing on these stars. But this looks like a double exposure almost. But I stacked all of these together. But let me get down to the moon shots, and I'll give you and it was a little bit cloudy too. Um, but here's a single shot of the moon. I'll punch in so you can see, and the detail's not bad, even in a single shot, right? Let me zoom in 200%. It's really not bad. So this is at f8, 258 millimeters. And this is raw image. There's no processing done here at all. So if I actually did a little bit of processing, first thing I did is I just cropped the image. And we'll just do a square crop. Like so. And then I'll just click auto here, see what that does. That usually jacks it up quite a bit, but we'll pull the highlights down, add a little bit of texture and clarity, and add some sharpening, do a little masking. Now when I pull the mask up, you see all this haze all the way around the moon. That's because it was a little bit hazy that night. Like there was a very thin layer of clouds um, over the moon, and that's all those spots and specks that you see in the mask. But other than that, it was a relatively clear night. So you can see even a single image um, with the 75 to 300, I was able to get really pretty decent detail out of this shot. And this is a 200% crop. And when I do the 200% crop, this is where you can start to see some of the artifacts and things when you don't do stacking and noise reduction and all of those other processes that you do when you do edit sort of astrophotography type images. But it's pretty impressive. So that's what I did. I had to crop. So so what I did is I took all these 60 images. Like if I go down here, oops, dang it. This is so unorganized. Oh, that was a JPEG image. That wasn't even the raw image. Hold on. Let me click this, sync settings. Hold on, sync, check all. There we go. And let's pull the highlights back up. All right, here's the raw image. All right, so what I'm going to do, I cropped this one, and then I went down to, let's say, one of the last images down here. And if I sync the settings again, oh, come on. Okay, I got this one selected. I'll just go down here to one of the other images, select that one, sync settings. What I should do is just make a video. Synchronize. Okay, so when you look at this image, when you can see that the moon moved from the very first image to this one. So what I had to do is, out of all 60 images, I had to go back and reposition this crop before I brought it into Photoshop and did all of the stacking. Anyhow, so this, like I said, again, this was on a tripod. I used the intervalometer to take 60 images, and then I took those 60 images, the raw images, cropped them. As the moon was moving, I had to recrop the image in Lightroom, and then I imported all of those into Photoshop and stacked them together using the median mode. You have to convert them to smart objects. There's lots of tutorials on how to do all that stuff. And then I came up with this image. I came up with this image as the final image. So anyhow, that's what I did one night. So let me check the questions here real quick. Oh, Robin is here. Hey, Robin, how are you? Lauren says the moonshot looks nice. Next, we'll see Rob venture out doing full moon to fight off the cats. Hold on, where's my chat? Here we go, show chat. There we go. Yeah, I was just talking about you, Robin. I was watching some of your videos. I was watching your video on high-res shot mode and how much detail you went into about how that actually works. And it was a good refresher for me because, there's so many features on our cameras that, that do all these neat things like handheld high-res shot mode. And it's good to understand how these things work so you can use them to, take advantage of them and get the most out of it, right? All of the features on our cameras, because ultimately you have to understand what these artificial intelligence or computational photography type tools are doing for us so that when we use them, we can use them to their full extent and maybe come up with the other creative ways to use them. So if you guys haven't seen Robin's high-res shot mode video, watch that. He does a really good job detailing how it works. He talks about the individual pixels, the red, green, and blue. I mean, it was really detailed, which, definitely you guys should check that out. Oh, Barana's here. DeMorgan's here. Robert Welsh, good to see you. Let's see. Robin Welsh has a question. Let me see if I can pop this up. Okay, so he's asking here, it says, any tips for focusing in live composite mode when doing star trails? Oh, yeah, what I like to do is I found that I get the best focusing with manual focus. And our Olympus lenses, fortunately, the precision of the manual focus, even though it's focused by wire on most of them, is really good. They really did not slack on the focus by wire part of our lenses. And what I do is I magnify the image. So I use the magnify feature to 14x is the maximum. So you magnify to 14x and you try to find the brightest star that you can. And then just manually focus until the star is as small as possible in the screen. Because when you're out of focus, it'll blur out and get a little bigger. And then as you focus in, it'll get really tiny and small. So use the magnify feature and don't use like the focus peaking and stuff. That'll just be very distracting. So just use manual focus and magnify to 14x on that one on the brightest star. And then once you've done that, then you can do live composite and go into that mode and all that. Another thing you might want to do, and it's a little harder to work this way, but you can turn on the live what the heck is it called? I'm drawing a blank here. Let me just pull it up in the camera, then I'll remember. If I have any cameras with a battery, then this one has a battery, I think. I got no cameras with a battery in them. How about this one? Live view. No, crap, hold on. I know it's called live something. It's in the D menu. D, scroll down. Live view boost. So you can try and turn live view boost. It's in the D menu on I think all of the cameras actually. Live view boost, and you turn that on to on 2. And on 2 will brighten the screen up. So if you're having trouble seeing the stars for whatever reason, you can turn on live view boost to on 2, and that'll brighten the screen up. But then you have to be very, very slow with the autofocusing because the screen is refreshing at like a quarter second. It's refreshing very slowly at that point. So hopefully that helps. Live view boost. Thank you, Barana. But when you use live view boost, it slows the refresh rate of the live view down to almost like a 1/4 of a second or slower. So when you turn the manual focusing, it will you have to wait a second for it to kind of refresh the screen to see if you actually achieved focus. And Robin has another tip there, it looks like. I'll put that up there for you guys to read. Another tip for impactful star trail shots, you need a foreground, a house hill, tree rocks. Yep. So he's talking more about the composition part. And a lot of times, well, with live composite, you don't have to worry about doing double exposures or bracketing or layering, right? But some people they'll take an image of the foreground separately, and then they'll do the long exposure in another frame, whether it's live composite or whatever, and then restack those back together in Photoshop or some software that can do layering of 2 images together. That's the most common way I've seen people do the foreground, where it's very bright, especially if you got trees and things moving in the frame. Even with live composite, that can blur the foreground a little bit if anything moves in the foreground. So what a lot of people do is they'll take one image of the foreground or whatever they want in the frame at the proper exposure, and then they'll take another exposure, whether it's live composite or bulb mode, whatever, and then in Photoshop blend those back together so that you have a very clean foreground and then a very clean background. And let's see, John Matthews has some news. I got the Panasonic 14 to 42. Uh, I think he meant easy kit lens. It's old stuff, but still good. Also got the GH2 with a nice with it. Okay, got that with together, right? I hacked it and it's making wonderful 1080p video. I'll use it for live streaming. Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, this just kind of goes back to you don't need brand new gear to get good quality photos and videos. You know, you can take excellent pictures with even this. I think this GH2, man, that's got to be at least 7 or 8 years old, if not more. Um, and still take great pictures and do video with them. I mean, cameras have been very capable for the last 10 years, and there hasn't been any dramatic improvements in general photography type images, you know, travel, landscape, you know, sports action, that kind of thing. There really hasn't been a ton of improvement in image quality. Yeah, we can push our ISOs a little higher, we get a little less noise, or maybe, you know, we have these computational type features now, like the handheld high res, the live ND. We also have, you know, faster shutter speeds, right? So we can do better sports action, maybe slightly better autofocusing and tracking, but there's really no need for the latest and greatest gear. If all you want to do is just go out and take some pictures and do some basic video, right? Um, you know, I'm very content. My Pen F now is what, 4 or 5 years old now, and I'm very content with that camera. I take it out, you know, with me on most of my photo walks. That's my camera of choice because of the controls that it has for JPEGs. And I shoot JPEGs like, um, I'm so out of practice here. But you know, these are straight out of camera JPEG images, right? I really like this one. On the photo walk I went on yesterday, I mean, I just put it in the monochrome profile 2, medium grain with a slight vignette, and you can do this all in camera. And then I tacked on a heavy red filter, which can also be done in camera to bring that blue sky. You see this contrast between the clouds and the sky and the grass. I mean, it just to me, it's just amazing what you can do with just in camera in the Pen F, and that's why it's my camera of choice when I go on photo walks. And I was using a manual focus lens. I adapted this 50 millimeter uh, Zuiko lens, right? It's a 50 millimeter f1.8 Olympus lens from back in the film days. You know, I ripped it off one of my OM cameras. Uh, And you know, I set it to f4 or f5.6 and you're done. And I took every single picture at f4 or f5.6 for most of the shots that I did on the photo walk yesterday. And it was perfectly fine. And it slowed me down because I did have to manually focus. And again, to manually focus, just like I was talking about the stars, I just magnify 14x and just manually focus and then take the picture. So you know, if you're not doing sports action type photography, you can get by with just the manual focus lens. Um, Sorry, let me just catch up on some of the chat. Yeah, Andreas agrees with me here. The Pen F is really excellent for monochrome photography, and something I learned from Robin Wong about the monochrome profiles, at least the grain, was that Olympus scanned film grain from actual film stock and then incorporated that into the algorithm in developing the grain that goes into the images. So supposedly the grain structure, when you add grain in camera, is unique on the Pen F and more film-like. Meaning, you know, you'll get a little more grain in the shadows and a little less grain in the highlights. You know, that's generally how film is, right? You get a little less grain in the shadows, and not too far off from digital actually, but um, yeah, the Pen F is amazing. Amazing camera for just JPEG shooting. And of course, you can always shoot RAW, right? I always shoot JPEG plus RAW, but I'm very content with the JPEGs that I get out of it. Um, And yeah, there he is. Robin says the film grain is from Kodak film. Yeah, so yeah, I learned that on one of your videos, I think, or maybe from another chat when you came in before. So I use it. I had it set to medium grain. I think the default setting is high grain. I thought that might have been a little too strong. Um, let me take a look. See if I can show you guys a better. Let me just pick the JPEGs. So I took 43 shots, and these are the JPEGs. So here it is. You know, that's a straight out of camera JPEG. And when I punch in, let me let that render out. I just manually focused, but you can see the grain right now. So there's grain here in the grass and stuff. And nobody pixel peeps a grainy image, right? You kind of look at it uh, like this, full screen or in print. And I think I'm gonna print this one and put this up on my wall. I really like this image. It's one of my favorites from the shoot yesterday. Um, and oh, Arthur's here. Hey, Arthur, how are you? Good to see you. And Leon, let's see. Oops, I'm sorry. Leon's asking, when can we send images in again for editing? I'm going to shoot for Tuesdays. Uh, so what I'll do is tomorrow I'll see how I'm feeling, and if I'm still on the path to healing, I will definitely stream on Tuesday and do some photo editing again because I miss doing that too. Uh, you know, the photo editing is as much fun as sitting here chatting with everyone. It's fun to see what you guys send in. I know a lot of people miss that, but that's the one I've had to sacrifice of the two streams that I do. You know, the photo chat and the photo editing. I had to sacrifice the editing because the editing, like I said, I'm usually sitting up like this, and this is the posture. I think that is you know, jacked me up. Um, so go ahead and send the images in, I guess, and we'll shoot for Tuesday. Well, I'll put the stream up tomorrow. If I'm feeling good tomorrow, I'll put it up. Um, because we all need a little bit of notice, and I need to pick an image from maybe my photo walk that I did yesterday. Trying to see. Yeah, I just love this. I'm sorry, I was looking at my stuff here. I just love these images I got yesterday. I forget what they call these knees. I don't know what these are, but apparently the roots from the tree uh, come up from the ground. It's weird. I never seen anything like this in my life. But this is another straight out of camera JPEG. This was some bamboo. I did a, you know, I got close up, tried to do a minimalist type photography. This one kind of sucked, but uh, I don't know what these are. But you know, the reason I'm showing is just to give you a feel for just straight out of camera JPEGs are just amazing on our Olympus cameras. And you can do this with any Olympus camera. You just adjust the highlight shadows on in your camera. I think monochrome profile 2 is simply a -6 shadow +6 on highlights. And then you can add grain later in post-processing if you want it. And Thomas says they're called burls from environmentally stressed trees. Is that true? And then Marcia says knees are plentiful here in Florida. Oh, okay. And cypress knees are plentiful here. They're cypress knees. So these are cypress trees and cypress. I can never remember, you know, uh, what these things are called. What's this one? Robin and Rob. Bamboo looks great if you shoot from the ground level with an olive. Yeah, that would be kind of cool. These are really small, thin. bamboos. They weren't very thick. They were only maybe a centimeter wide or a quarter inch in thickness in diameter. And David Surround says, thanks for your help the other day with focusing. I did not explain myself. I meant to say that once I select live comp mode, I can only focus touching the screen. Is that normal? Oh, so if you're trying to do, yeah, it's still not clear. Let me just go into live comp on my camera real quick. So I assume you're trying to focus a different way. So I'm in live comp. Let me get a regular lens on. Push the shutter button once for, hold on. Okay, so no, I can have, I can have press the shutter button. I think what you're missing, you probably need to look at it this way. Let me hide this. Go to a full screen. So I need to put this into shutter priority. Shutter priority. Oops. There we go. And then let's put this into, really? Why isn't it going into live? Oh, maybe I can't do live bulb when I'm doing this on the screen. Let me try manual. Oh, there we go. Live. So I have to be in manual mode. All right, so in live comp, so let me get one picture off. On the screen, oh, it doesn't show this way, so I have to do it another way. I'm sorry. Let me see if I can do it this way. All right, you see right here, there's a little icon, right? Right now, it's like a little white icon with a finger and an arrow, a do not sign going through it. You touch this, and this will cycle through the different focusing modes. So what you can do is right now I'm on touch to focus, like you're familiar with, right? And then if I turn this off to where it's like a white, it's really hard to see, isn't it? Let me, there, if I turn it, so you turn it to this white arrow, it looks like a finger with a little line going through it. Now you can focus just half pressing the shutter button. And then of course, you can just change the focusing mode here to manual if you want to manually focus to MF. And then you can just manually focus like this. I hope that answers your question. Okay. Oops. Hopefully that answers your question. And we have a clear view. Okay, good. And wow, your monochrome on Instagram, nice. Oh, thank you. I hope I can find nice trees and plants in Malaysia. Yeah, you'll find lots of stuff in Malaysia, man. It's a tropical area, so they probably got, oh gosh, I haven't been to Malaysia in 20 years, but There was a lot of trees in Malaysia, and I see. I'm just going through. Marcia says she focuses before she goes to live comp, which makes sense. Oh, David. Okay, I did answer your question. Okay, good, good. I saw that, and I see. I haven't seen. Oh, Rick is here. Hey, Rick, how you doing? Good to see you. Rick Bear is here. There was a window where we didn't see Rick Bear for a long time because he had his own, issues he was going through that he talked about back then. And I won't rehash them here, but I'm glad you're back, and I hope you're feeling better. And Magrat's doing well. Um, and let's see, Randy's here. Good to see you, Nature Chan. John Truman, good. Marcia, and John Truman says, let me go to that. Says here, I just switched from using Lightroom CC to Lightroom Classic, finding it so much better to use and produce the images I need. Loving the texture and clarity issues. Yeah, I've never used Lightroom CC. I used the Lightroom Classic myself. Because I think I tried Lightroom CC, because you get both, right, when you subscribe. And yeah, it was kind of limited, I thought. So I didn't see any point to going to Lightroom CC when Lightroom Classic has always worked well. And honestly, I could even get away with just using Olympus Workspace for most of my images, and that's what I do. Actually, for most of my images, I just use Olympus Workspace. But um, as you can see, I try to just shoot straight out of camera JPEGs whenever I can because I've been saying this forever since I started my channel. There's so many great channels out there, and they show you their photography and what they do, and they show you the images they get, but they never, time to time they will, but they never really go into detail about how they got that final image. They don't show you all of the processing that they did. And sometimes they don't even show you the raw image and then the final image. I'm starting to see more of that now, though, actually. People are showing the raw image and then some basic editing to get the final images, which is really nice. But when I started my channel, I didn't see that a whole lot. So I always showed pictures on my Instagram. I'd say 90% plus are straight out of camera JPEGs, just so you can see what's possible without doing any crazy manipulation to the photos. Now, of course, there's some photos I do want to edit uh, time to time. I do, like I do my photo editing live streams. I do a lot of editing there. Um, but for the most part, when I shoot for my own personal satisfaction, I try to get the image I want in camera first. And when I do my professional work, my real estate photography, I have to shoot raw. I have to do a ton of editing because I'm dealing with very, very high dynamic range scenes in every shot, just about. I mean, time to time, I don't have to worry. Like a bathroom without a window, usually I can just do an HDR shot, and that's good enough, right? Because it's one light source, just the one light in the bathroom. But bedrooms, living rooms where they got large windows and you got, ambient sunlight coming in at one color temperature, and then you have all the artificial lighting in the bedroom or living room, whether it's LED or fluorescent or tungsten. I have to do so much editing with real estate photography, mainly because of white balance issues. Not so much, well, with white balance and with highlights and shadows, because the dynamic range is so high, right? Because windows would all be blown out if I didn't do any processing. And David says the main difference, trying to keep this up. The main difference between CC and Classic is how the photos are stored. Okay. Like I said, I never mess with CC. I just use Lightroom Classic, so I can't speak to that. I'm a very light user when it comes to Lightroom and Photoshop. I know how to do one thing basically with my real estate photography, how to stack and layer images and some other basic things, but all the other fancy stuff on that software, I don't use. There was one image that I did spend a lot of time compositing, and it's just so much work. I just want to take some nice pictures, not, I guess if I did something professionally where I had to do all kinds of stuff, Photoshop makes a lot of sense, but for the basic stuff I do, it, it's much more than I need. And I see Kamadadori Photography's here. Hi, how you doing? Good to see you. Uh, I thought I saw something here from John. It says the interesting thing about the GH2 is that it has multi-aspect ratio sensor. In 4/3 mode, it's a 2x crop. In 16:9, it's a 1.86 crop. Wonder if Olympus would do something like that. Huh. That is interesting. I mean, I know they did something similar like on their LX100 where they talked about it's a 4/3 sensor, but they crop it differently. I don't know. I don't know why. Well, I don't know what the advantage of doing something like that is, other than just getting the different aspect ratios. But it seems to me, if you want to get the maximum number of megapixels, you have to have the full image circle covering the entire 4/3 sensor. And doing any kind of cropping would reduce that. Because if I remember correctly, the LX100 has a 20 megapixel sensor in it, but with the different aspect ratios and cropping that it did, you were only getting 17 or 18 megapixels instead of the full 20. Um, and it just seems to me it's just easy to do it digitally in camera because you can adjust the aspect ratio in our cameras, right? I do 1:1s a lot. I do verticals sometimes, 3:4 instead of 4:3. But I don't know if I would like it being forced on me uh, via the way the camera's designed to only use a certain amount of the sensor. But it's interesting nonetheless, right? And Mike Ham, how are you, Mike? Says, hey, community, I would like to start looking at booking a photo safari to South Africa region to shoot big animals. Anyone got a recommendation for a good company to look at this through? And I have no idea. But if anyone can answer Mike's question, I'm sure he'll appreciate it. And it continues. When's the best time of year to go for animal shooting? Whew, no idea. And John says the GH2 and the GH5S have larger than M43 sensors. Oh, okay. I know the GH5S is a 12 megapixel dual gain sensor, but I don't know about its actual size. If it's a little larger, it makes sense though to get that wider. I guess what do they call it? Cinema, cinema, cinema. I'm not that much into video, really. I just keep things simple, right? Whatever the camera can do, I just do it. I just use whatever it is. Um, one says, I just started to make videos with my EM1 Mark III at work. It's an all new world for me. I need to watch your tutorials again soon. Oh, hey Casper, how are you? Um, yeah, the M1 Mark III, actually all of it, from the Mark IIs and the Mark IIIs, they do great 1080p video no matter which one you get. And if you need to do 4K video, the M1 Mark II, the M1 Mark III are really good. I don't go into too much detail in any of my tutorials about doing video. I talk more about exposure for video in my video tutorials and some of the settings. But um, there's so much emphasis when you watch these videos online about the autofocus in video and the face detect and things like that. When most, I think, serious videographers, they do not rely on the autofocus. They manually focus everything, they frame everything before they start the scene, and then they start the shot. The only people that really worry about autofocus are like vloggers, and people that make YouTube videos, because they're usually one-man bands or one-woman bands, and they need the camera to be in focus while they're walking around and talking, like a lot of things I do. And this is where I think, EM1 Mark III, EM1 Mark II do an excellent job with that kind of thing. But serious videographers, yeah, they don't worry about that. And so I think even though Panasonic, the GH5s and the S5s and all of their S series, even though the autofocus isn't as reliable for your average YouTube or vlogger type person, for videographers, all of the other features in those cameras you just can't get them in anything else, and that's why those cameras are used a lot. And a lot of times they adapt manual lenses onto these GH5s and S series cameras because they don't care about the autofocus at all. But most of my tutorials on video, if I recall, were more about the settings and doing exposure and some of the challenges you run into with exposure when you're doing video. Because with video, you're locked into, frame rates, right? Like 24p, 30p, 60p. So that locks your frame rate, which is semi-related to your shutter speed, right? So what shutter speed do you pick to get the exposure that you want? And if you want to do the 180 angle, so if you have a 24p uh, frame rate, you pick a shutter speed of 1/48th of a second or 1/50th of a second, depending what your camera is capable of, to get that 180 angle, to get that more natural cinema type look. Because if you choose too high a shutter speed, it might start to look a little bit choppy with fast moving objects. And if you go too low, because if you're at 24p, you can select a shutter speed of 1/25th or 1/24th of a second, but that's the lowest you can go. You can't go below the 24p frame rate in video. So when you're working with video and exposure, you run into limitations that you don't run into when you're doing photography. And I think that's where my tutorials mainly focused on, was sort of the limitations when you're working with exposure and video. And so like if you're working at 1/60th of a second, or 60p video, you can't go to a shutter speed below 1/60th of a second. And ideally, you want a shutter speed of 1/120th of a second. But sometimes that's not going to work because you're not getting enough light into the camera because you want to use a certain aperture. You want to be at f8, for example. And if you go to 1/20th of a second shutter speed, image is going to be too dark. So then you have to start cranking the ISO. So there's all kinds of issues there's all kinds of bumpers, right, in video when it comes to exposure. And by bumpers, I mean you're hitting different shutter speeds, different ISOs, different frame rates to try to get the exposure right. So you have to put into account frame rate in addition to all of the other exposure triangle things: shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. So there's really 4 things you have to look at. And if you watch my tutorials on video, so I go into the settings, but I also talk about exposure and why, a lot of videographers, they have to use a lot ND filter on their lenses, or they have to use very fast lenses, things like that. And you're saying my videos are mostly shot in S mode. Yes. So you want to control the shutter speed to get the shutter angle possibly, and then you just have to work with the ISO and aperture, right? But just like in photography, you use too high of an ISO, you start losing image quality. All the same things apply with high ISO in video as it does in photography. The nice thing about video, though, even in 4K, is you don't have to have a tack sharp lens, right? You could get away with using a kit lens because it'll more than resolve a 2 megapixel image, which is 4K. And I'm sorry, 1080p is a 2 megapixel image, right? 1980 by 10, 1920 by 1080 is only 2 megapixels. And 4K is what, 36 by 2. So that's like an 8 megapixel image. You can use, you don't have to have pro glass if you can work within the aperture ranges for video and still get a great sharp image in video, even with a kit lens. And let's see, Phil's asking, Rob, when you're shooting monochrome, have you ever done a comparison between in-camera filters and physical filters? Yes, I have. Oops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean. Let me hide that, put this back. So here's the question, right? When I'm shooting monochrome, have you ever done a comparison? So I have a red filter for one of my film cameras, and it's terrible. It's terrible. When you put a red filter, physical red filter on a digital camera, the results, I got terrible results. Because the red, your sensor already has red, green, and blue filters covering it already, the RGB array, right? Like, what do they call it? The Bayer array. And then stacking another red filter in front of that, unless that red filter is the exact same color red as it was terrible. And then I compared putting a red filter on my film camera against versus the red filters in my digital camera. And again, the results were just terrible. So that led me to two conclusions, right? One is never use, and this is just from my own experience, right? Never use physical red filters, blue filters, whatever, on a digital camera. It just, unless you've had a camera converted to monochrome, the results are very unpredictable and not usable, in my opinion. The other conclusion I came to is I really don't know what I'm doing when I'm using physical filters, right? Because when I put a red filter on my film camera, I've only recently started shooting film in the last couple of years. When I put a red filter on my film cameras, I was getting terrible results with that too. Um, so yeah, so I've done that comparison with no success at all. It was a total failure. So I guess, it's not a simple thing. Since I have no experience using actual physical filters, I got terrible results. Now, I would imagine somebody that's more experienced using these kinds of filters on their film cameras or on their digital cameras may be able to get great results with it and be able to show you how to do that to get good results. But I'm not the guy because I tried it. It just seems very intuitive, right? Put a red filter on your camera and you'll get results you would expect when you apply a red filter, but I did not. I got terrible results. And I would dig them up for you here in Lightroom, but it was a while ago. Um, so yeah, I'm sorry, Phil. Yeah, I would say really find someone that knows what they're doing with those kinds of filters before you try it yourself. Uh, because if you've never done it before, you'll probably get the same results I did, which were just horrific. And Randy says, I found out when updating the street view, you need to just wait and 360s will get uploaded. Oh, you guys must be talking about something else. And here's a comment. See, John might know. The colored filters work great when you modify your camera sensor, taking off the standard filters. Yeah. So I mentioned that earlier. If you take the red, green, blue, that Bayer array filter off your digital sensor, like what John Matthews is saying, have your camera converted to monochrome, then I think you might be able to experiment with actual physical red filters, yellow filters. Um, and then you might be able to have some more fun with it that way. But I don't have any monochrome only cameras. And even when I tried it on my monochrome film, I was getting terrible results. So And Lauren says red works for really extreme shots, but orange might be better choice. So yeah, the way I remember it is, you know, the red filters are great for like skies, to really make the skies very dark, right? And then orange and yellow filters are better for more natural looking type images. And yellow being used a lot for portraits, to brighten the person's face, skin tones, in the image so they stand out a little more. So again, that's a whole area of photography I'm not that familiar with. So excuse me one second. I need to crank up the heater a little bit. It was 41 degrees in this room when I came in and started the stream. Now it's up to 53, but I'm still a little bit cold. So I turned the heater up a little bit more. Um, and Nature's asking, did you use the red orange external filters on my underwater housing? Did you used to use a red on my underwater housing, but since changing the Micro Four Thirds and now using a TG6, I do not bother settings on the camera. Yeah, yeah. I'm like I said, our sensors already have red, green, and blue filters on them, um, to make the color images. And then when you go into Photoshop or Lightroom, you can adjust the individual colors, which is effectively doing the same thing as putting a filter on. Lauren says, on street, I rarely go black and white as there are times when colors are so much better. Can change the black and white as needed to in post. Yeah. Lauren takes Lauren, and Lauren takes really, he's a very active photographer. He goes out, I feel like, almost every day and shoots, and does street photography and puts his portfolio online. So a lot of times, if you look at the comments on my videos, you'll see a link to Lauren's portfolio. And his images are always very vibrant, very rich, saturated colors. And he looks for things. He looks for colors. He has a really good eye for finding colors in a scene and composing those so that the colors work within the scene, within the composition. I don't know. I've just kind of grown. Black and white has kind of grown on me lately. So I've been shooting a lot of black and white. I I'd like to go back into color. I don't know. Every time I shoot my color images, they just don't look great. But right now it's winter, so there's not much color anyway. Maybe when it gets a little warmer and spring comes around, I'll start doing some hardcore color images again. But in the winter time, I've kind of been drawn to black and white. And Tony says, shoot for black and white, trying to make a color shot more interesting with black and white rarely works. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you're shooting, yeah, you have to shoot. Okay, I think what Tony's trying to say is you have to shoot with the intent to shoot in black and white or with the intent to shoot in color. Uh, because usually when you're shooting for one format or the other, the composition might be completely different. Because a lot of times in black and white, you're just looking for tones and looking for where the light is, and then your normal composition rules, right? With color, you have to add in the fact that there's complementing colors, the contradicting colors, there's opposite colors, right? There's a lot of if you ever study color science, there's a lot of things you have to consider if you really want to get into it when you're composing scenes, because a lot of times, think of like a model in a red dress against a nice sandstone, structure. The red is going to pop out very a lot more than it would if you did a black and white image. So the color image will be much more striking, right? That complementary sandstone with the red dress, uh, as opposed to a black and white image, which might be just a very dark, tone versus a very light tone. And so, that's just one simple example, I think, of what Tony's trying to say. And Sanja says you get a lot more editing options shooting in color than convert to later to black and white. Yes. So again, a lot of times, if you're just shooting in color all the time, and then in the back of your mind you're thinking this might work in black and white. So when you get back into post-processing, you can kind of convert it back to black and white and see what you get. Like I said, when you're working with raw images, you're only working with color anyway, and you convert them to black and white later. But sometimes you find images that work really well in black and white, better than they did in color. I find this a lot with like that image I did. I can show you. I think this is a good example of that. Let me go back up. Let me go to the raw images. Like this image here, right? This is the same image in color. Hold on, it's going to convert back. It loaded the preview. But to me, this image, the problem with this image in color, and I'll go full screen, is I felt like the trees right here in the middle, right? Right here. You can't see my mouse. But right in the middle of the images, the foreground trees blend in too much with the background trees when this is in color. So I was able to manipulate this. Well, I didn't manipulate it, but when you just do a simple conversion to black and white, you can see that the trunks of the trees stand out more now because they're much darker toned than they were when they were in color. So if I go back to color, I felt like it blended in too much. And then I go to black and white, right? And then if we look at and that's just a straight up black and white conversion. Then if we look at the JPEG image, this is the straight out of camera JPEG. Where I dialed in highlights and shadows, in camera and added some grain. Now I felt like the tree trunks and the trees in the foreground stood out much better than they did in color. I mean, not the best example, but that's kind of the idea. Sometimes you find images that work better in black and white than they do in color. And Rick, oh hey Rick, rather than shooting digital black and white, it's more effective to shoot color, but then use in-camera settings or pose to create partial color image, give you striking images. Yes, that's another sort of in between, right? You can do full-on color, very rich, vibrant colors like a lot of photos that Lauren does. Or you can do black and white like I do. I do very high contrast black and whites a lot of times. But then there's also partial color, right? Where it's very, you don't like do selective color, where you pick like a red dress, for example, and everything else is black and white. But you could do a partial color where the sand, the tones are very muted in the background, and then the colors in the foreground are a little bit stronger but still muted. And that also makes for a really nice, striking image, as Rick is saying. So I'm not the most creative person. I struggle a little bit with partial color myself. Um, I haven't had much success with it. Let me go to. I think like this image here. Um, hold on. Yeah. See this image here, this is a raw image and it's very muted because it's winter time, right? So there's not a lot of color going on. But even so, I think this is still kind of a pleasing image, right? Even in color. But if we pull the colors back a little bit, like so, and then just crank up maybe the oranges. So let me selectively crank up just these yellow tones. And oops, that's the luminance. I meant to crank up the saturation. And then I'll pull back the saturation here. So, you can kind of get more interesting images. So this is not bad. And then if you look at just the black and white, I went with black and white ultimately, but I think this is what Rick is trying to emphasize is that by selectively saturating certain colors a little more than the rest, but kind of keep an overall muted tone, you can get some very interesting images, and then just warm it up a tiny bit, right? You can do you see where I'm going, right? But this is where I struggle personally. Is I'm not super creative that way. Lauren says add sepia to the image. Yes, sepia. I do like messing with split tones and messing with the tone curves and colors. That can also add some interesting effects to the image as well. And yeah, David's saying that blue skies can be tricky to get the right shade. Yeah, especially if you're doing black and white. But even in color, blue skies have all kinds of different tones, right? Sometimes they're more, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Sky blue, and then they're more navy blue sometimes. Depends on the time of day, right? And then you go into twilight, which is a very dark, rich navy blue color, which is beautiful. And then sometimes you get into magentas and all kinds of things. So sky can be tricky depending on the time of day. Oops, I accidentally popped up as um, Rick is saying it's worse shooting in RAW, so your EVF shows a monochrome image while the RAW file contains the information and post-processing into RAW. So exactly, what Rick is trying to say is, when you're shooting in RAW, if you have your camera set to monochrome, the raw image will still save all of the color data. So you can always go back to a color image if you want to. But by shooting in monochrome using RAW, you can compose the images in black and white in the EVF or on the live view. And I think that's something that, digital cameras with offers now that we didn't used to be able to do with film, right? Because in the film days, we just had an optical viewfinder. We saw everything in color, and then we would shoot black and white film. But with our digital cameras, we can now shoot raw images, but compose looking at black and white image, looking at it as black and white in our EVF and our live view, and that's uh, that's one of the great advantages of our digital cameras now. And John says, if you type landscape photography into Google, you'll find that same style over the top, oversaturated images. They're cliche now. I'm tired of seeing them. Yeah. Yeah, certain genres or certain styles kind of go into fashion and out of fashion, right? Like, I don't know how many years ago it was, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe longer. HDR, that surreal look HDR image was very, very popular, right? Everybody wanted to see these crazy, unrealistic looking HDR images. And that seems to have kind of gone out of fashion now. So if right now in landscape, it's possible that um, what he's saying is a very saturated look type, landscapes are popular. So be it. These things come and go, but ultimately, the your foundation of photography has to stand, right? You have to be able to have good composition, good exposure, and sort of some creative. Then from there you can kind of get creative, right? With going black and white or full on saturation, HDR, whatever you want to do, whatever floats your boat. Go ahead and do it. I don't want to discourage anybody from taking any kind of image they want, right? Whether it's the very high contrast, high saturated images or very muted, partial color, black and white. Um, Photography is just about expressing yourself and really enjoying your craft. It's it doesn't matter what the trends are, what people are doing. Just do whatever you enjoy, you know. Did I hear someone say Ken Rockwell? I don't know. Uh, we should all, Sanja said, we should all go back to film. Yeah, I shoot film from time to time, and like I said, I've said this many times. If you're a very competent photographer and you've only shot digital, I'd say definitely shoot a roll or two of film every now and then. You know, um, because I think you'll learn a lot from it. At the very least, I think you'll enjoy shooting film time to time, like I do. I like to shoot film time to time. I like to print my images. You know. Uh, Like I said, it's all about the journey. The journey is the destination, as they say, right? I'm not trying to win awards or anything like that. Um, and Rick says, "You got it, Rob. As it's often hard to visualize how something will look in partial color, it helps to have the EVS showing the monochrome and save the color to raw." Okay, so we were talking about that a minute ago. Um, one second, let me check something. Okay. Oh, David Tellett's here. How are you? Um, John used to say, shooting film really makes me slow down and concentrate on what I'm doing. I can get sloppy shooting digital if I don't watch it. Yeah. What slows me down when I shoot digital is shooting with a manual focus lens and shooting in black and white. That slows me down quite a bit. But shooting film definitely slows you down because half the time you're using a camera that's probably 50 years old. So you're wondering if it's going to even crank or jam or whatever. Um, but yeah, it definitely slows you down. It's hard to get through. Um, I went on a photo walk yesterday and I shot for about an hour and a half and I only shot 43 images. Two or three of them were just test shots. So I really shot about 40 images in an hour and a half. It used to be when I went out on a photo walk, oh my God, there would be, I'd burn through three, 400 images at least, if not more. But since I started shooting film again, it's kind of slowed me down in my digital photography as well. Like I said, especially like yesterday, I was shooting with a manual focus lens. And Lauren says, I hear so much advice on street photography, yet they forget the basics. Set an alarm on your smartphone for the parking meter. Don't drink a gallon of coffee or water. Yeah. Yeah, that's good sound advice. Especially when you get over 50 or whatever age it is that it starts happening where you can't hold your bladder like you used to. Um, I don't have a bladder of steel like I used to when I was younger, man. I could go all day without a restroom break. Now it's like, I have to kind of plan ahead, right? Make sure there's like when I go to Shenandoah Mountains, I know where all the good restrooms are. It's kind of like that old Seinfeld episode where George Costanza knew where all the best restrooms were in the city. In the city, um, Shenandoah, I know. And when I do street photography, you have to keep in mind which restaurants are kind of slack when it comes to people coming in off the street and using their restrooms. There's always McDonald's. McDonald's are a pretty safe bet, but a lot of times in street photography, there's no McDonald's, right? At least in my area. So I have to find the certain restaurants or businesses that have like a restroom you can use. And Tony says a lot of people give up if they went to film. They would get fed up with wasting money. Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I was saying. If that's why I say don't start with film. But if you're a competent photographer with digital, I think it's your chances of wasting time and money with film are much less. Because yeah, it can be frustrating, right? Shooting film. Um, because the gear is old, so you don't know if the meters are right, But assuming you have a good working film camera and you're competent with exposure and digital photography, I think you might enjoy film, but not as a beginner. A beginner, I don't recommend unless somebody's standing there teaching you, right, how to use film cameras. I wouldn't do it as a beginner. And Nature said, if you ever come to London, then go business class on the plane for the easier access to the toilet. Okay. I need to start traveling again. I always say I don't like to travel. Um, but sometimes I think maybe I should start traveling again. Go out and visit because you guys, I have so many open invitations from many of you, which I really appreciate. I'd love to go out and travel now that I know some of you guys in different countries. It makes it a little less intimidating for me because when it comes to plane travel, when you're on 10, 12-hour flights or more, I was on a 20-hour flight once. All of a sudden, the journey is not the destination. The destination is the destination. The journey part of traveling sucks. Oh my God, I hate flying. Anyway, what's this here? Shame they don't have smaller storage size memory cards, as a card that only hold 10 to 20 shots would help many photographers produce better images. Shoot and pray, or I'll fix it in the post syndrome. Yeah, there was I don't know what live stream I was watching, but somebody was talking about that where they would give their students 128 megabyte, not gigabyte, like 128 megabyte cards, so you could only fit like 7 or 8 images on them when they went out and shot. So there is someone out there teaching using very limited memory cards with their digital cameras, and it's hard because technically, if you can control yourself, you can say I'm only going to shoot 24 pictures today with a digital camera. You could do it, right? But I don't know how many people really have that kind of discipline. I know I wouldn't. If I have, I buy the big cards, right? 256 megabytes or gigabyte cards. 256 gigabyte cards. I can store 10,000 images on that. I don't think I would have that sort of self-discipline. So shooting film kind of forces that on me. Yeah, Lauren says, I love driving as the journey is part of the experience. Absolutely. I I really like driving when I get out of this area. In this immediate area, the traffic is just ridiculous. People are lunatics. But once I get out to the mountains or into the smaller towns, like all of my drive-by photography episodes, are kind of a little bit far out. And that's fun. You can just roll the window down, take a picture. You don't have to worry about people honking at you, like get out of the way and all that stuff. Um, and Nature says, you're always welcome to come see us in London, go out on the street, maybe a live chat from London. Oh, that would be cool, wouldn't it? We have some super fast broadband, 200 megabits. Good. I might take you up on that. London, if I travel, probably London would be the first place I go to. Um, that would be the path of least resistance because there's a lot of you here from London that have sent me invitations, but also, I don't. Everything is in English, so I can read and I can talk to people and get to meet people and stuff. Because I've traveled to foreign countries where I couldn't read anything, and I had to learn to speak Chinese a little bit. I got, I didn't get super fluent, but I could speak Chinese. It was Cantonese in a very rudimentary way, right? It's very broken. And it was so funny that the local people would just laugh at me because they said I have such an American accent. I'm like, God, that's weird. Like I'm speaking Cantonese, but they say I have an American accent. So it's funny, because I hear people coming here where English isn't their first language and they have an accent. And so I can appreciate when I speak a different language that I have an American accent. It sounds funny to them, right? And let's see, Raho says, I'm thinking about converting an OM10 Mark II to infrared. Any thoughts? Yeah, do it. Do it. Either infrared or full spectrum. I mean, I haven't done it to any of my cameras, but everyone that's done it, like I think Randy, if Randy's here, he's done it to one of his cameras. He loves it. He loves it. And you'll get really amazing images. If you look on Flickr and search for infrared images where people have done those conversions, the images are amazing. And Lauren saying street photography is challenge. You must be in seconds lineup shot, see what is in the foreground and background, and have a camera with decent settings. Yeah, yeah. Street photography is just like sports action, right? You have to capture that moment at that precise moment, and it's even harder than sports action in a lot of ways because it's not as predictable what's going to happen or what direction people are going to walk in. When you're covering sports action type stuff, a lot of times you can kind of predict where the players are going to run, where the cars are going to be. But in street photography, it's a lot more random, right, and unpredictable. So it's harder in some ways, I think. Oh, and Scott's here. How you doing, Scott? Yeah, I didn't put up much notice for the stream today. What time is it? It's 12:30. Okay, so I need to end soon because I'm starting to feel a little bit tension here in my neck, not with you guys. And let's see. Marcia says, everyone speaks with an accent. So true. And nature says, my wife is German, but it'd be difficult to pick up on any German slant. She has more of an American feel when she speaks like parking lot. Yeah. Um, and David Crook says, it's so much easier for me to read it here than on this screen down here. Thanks. I got to work this. I got to rearrange my studio here. Um, Lauren says, my mom will be here soon with a bowl of chicken noodle soup to fix that neck and say hi to Ellie. Yeah. Uh, yeah, I told my mom, do not bring me anything until I say I'm ready because I got to empty my fridge out. I mean, there's so much stuff in my fridge. And now finally I got two shelves almost clear. I need to get another shelf clear and then I can start working on the freezer section. And once I get my refrigerator almost empty, then I'll say, okay, mom, whatever you want to bring over. I'll eat it because she kept bringing me stuff every couple of days, something, soup or sushi or whatever, and stuff started going bad in my fridge because I just can't eat that much. I had to throw away half a chicken. You know, and she goes, well, don't throw it away, just put it in the freezer. I said, mom, my freezer's full. I just cannot, put anything in my freezer. And once it goes in the freezer, a lot of times I never see it again. And then it's been a year or two and I throw it away anyway because I'm not eating anything, even if it's been frozen, that's a year old. You know what I mean? I just chuck it. If I didn't have a taste for it for a year, I'm never going to have a taste for it. uh, and let's see. What are your thoughts on the M5 and the M1? Oh, that's a question for Plato. If you can buy the EM1s, it's just I mean the EM5 is a great camera, but I think the M1 is more professional camera. Better grip anyway. Yeah, Sanja says better see a doc because if it's the discs, it's definitely the disc. Because this happened to me about 10 years ago, where I had three herniated discs in my neck, and finally I ended up getting cortisone shots. Ultimately, but I'm not in as bad a shape as I was 10 years ago. It was really bad. This is not quite as bad. This is probably only not even a quarter as bad as it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, man, I was crippled. But this is only about a quarter as bad because I can manage it with just regular over the counter type, ibuprofen, Tylenol. Back then, it didn't matter. I need to get on some hardcore painkillers just to get the pain down to a level where I could sleep. I didn't sleep for like 3 or 4 days until they prescribed me some really hardcore stuff. And then we scheduled, the cortisone shots, and that worked. So I'm not anywhere near that level. It won't get that bad because it gets a little better every week. But then I do something like this, I'll start streaming for a long time, and then I set myself back again. But okay, nature's saying, or John says, don't push your neck luck today. I'm looking forward to seeing you in good shape tomorrow. Oh, yes. Hey, John, how are you? Yes. Definitely, I'm going to work with you tomorrow. Um, Flying Fish is asking, am I wearing a soft collar to bed? No. That's not a bad idea, though. It's not a bad idea. Okay, I think I'll call it here. Um, I need to go lay down and rest and do some exercises. So thanks again, everyone, for joining me today. I know it's been a while. I'll do as many as I can, but it's going to be limited for the next week, couple of weeks, maybe the rest of the month. It's going to be very limited how much I can do live streaming or videos. So, um, but I always appreciate you guys taking time of your day to spend it with me. It's like I said, it's always the highlight of my day. So you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend, guys and gals. I'll see you again as soon as I can.